are at risk every day on and around Coburg's Bell Street Bridge at the Nicholson and Elizabeth Street intersection.
The area is notorious for traffic accidents. Recently, a Coburg High School student was injured by a car while walking in the area.
Footpaths on the Bell Street Bridge are significantly narrower than other bridges in the area, yet the Bell Street Bridge carries more traffic than almost any other road in Merri-bek, 47,000 vehicles a day. The narrow paths, along with high volumes of cars, trucks and buses, pose an unacceptable risk to safety and accessibility in our communities.
We know that more than 1,000 people walk and wheel across the bridge on weekdays, just in the morning and afternoon peak periods. Even more use the bridge during the day and on weekends. We also know that students are worried about walking and cycling across the bridge. And for many, it's their only way to and from school, or to access the after-school activities and shops.
I've heard lots of horror stories about near misses and things like that, but most of what I see is just less than a metre in between the pedestrians and the cars, and 3 lanes of traffic going as fast as they want. It's really not a secure space because there's no separation in between the traffic, which is loud and fast, and the footpath where usually school kids are walking across.
I use the Bell Street Bridge almost every day, maybe 4 times a week, and it just makes me feel very unsafe. I myself have had terrible experiences on the bridge.
The thing is, I haven't seen one. I've actually been in an accident. We were just like traffic, waiting for the green light, and then out of nowhere, pow, the back of the car just gets slammed into by another one. We practically jump out of our seats.
It's one of the main connections to get me home, so yeah, I have to use it on a daily basis. I've seen some near misses. I've been in a few near misses myself, especially around the little island in front of the service station.
So I was actually involved in a car accident myself. It was in the rain, a lady lost control of her van and actually went into the barricade. So I got pulled back from that and then had to pull one of the ladies out of the car. I was probably in year 9. So that was pretty traumatic and pretty scary to see. That kind of put me off using the bridge, especially by myself. It's very small and it's especially after school and before school, there's lots of kids going to and forth, especially because there's a 7-Eleven there. So it can be pretty packed, and obviously after school traffic makes it really, really hard. They've already implemented different lower limits, but in a sense that doesn't really change anything because not everyone follows the rules. Our school has lots of active transport modes. We use the bike paths and things that surround the Bell Street Bridge, including Merri Creek. There's kids coming to and from every single day, and I think that it's super important that we make that environment more safer and more easily accessible for students of all ages.
That is why we're asking all parties to commit $250,000 to investigate and design safe and accessible active travel options over Coburg's Bell Street Bridge. We need this investigation to be completed urgently within the next 12 months.
We're ready for all levels of government to work together with the community to promote safe, active travel for the current and future students of Coburg High School and the communities of Merri-bek and Darebin cities. To show your support, visit change.org and sign the No More Accidents in the Bell Street Risk Zone petition.
I had insulation put up on the top of the roof. It was a good thing to do. When I read it in your local paper, and it said, it does help, and the lady was very happy. And I said, if she's happy, I think I will be happy too. And yeah, I think it's the best thing that I came up with. The difference that it's made, it's comfortable, especially in summer. I hate summer, yeah. Winter I can put a jacket on, but summer it's terrible for me. So this, keeps everything down nice and clean, comfortable for the summer. I have to go through the winter, but I think it will be just as good. Yeah, just have it done. The people who actually looked after the job and done the job, it was the best people that I come across. I felt very comfortable. I felt like if I was with my brothers. Yeah, so have no fear. They're great people.
Merri-bek Council is currently rolling out a new 4-bin waste service. This is part of the state government curbside reforms, and all Victorian councils will move to a 4-bin system. New purple-lidded glass recycling bins are currently being delivered to households and businesses across Merri-bek. Glass recycling bin collections will start in July, so please store your purple bins somewhere safely until then. Until glass recycling collection begins, continue using your yellow mixed recycling bin for all recycling material. From July this year, purple glass recycling bins will be picked up monthly or every 4 weeks. You can place your empty glass jars and bottles into this bin. If jars and bottles have their lids, make sure that they are kept on and not disposed of loosely inside the bin. By sorting your glass into a separate bin, you are improving the quality of recyclables in Merri-bek. You can learn more about the 4-bin service at merri-bek.vic.gov.au/your-new-bins.
I'm here on behalf of the City of Moreland to start the official process of renaming our municipality. The council received a letter from the Wurundjeri Wurrung. The Wurundjeri Wurrung said, retention of this name for the principal civic body for a diverse community is untenable. The council agreed.
The language of this land is not lost, it's still looking for its people. And this is one big step actually to bring the voice of the land back by naming the local language area. Language connects us to culture. It's how we learn everything, how we express everything. Now let's use all the wisdom, resources, capacity, knowledge, history to learn from the past and never let it happen again, and move forward and help the people that need it the most.
Open Streets trials are initiatives to open the streets to people walking, riding, scooting, and close the streets to car traffic just to drop off and pick up times. We know that a lot of schools in Merri-bek really struggle with congestion. We also know that a lot of families want to walk or ride to school, but the dangerous zones outside the school gates often push people away from making that choice. So it's really about just creating a really hyper-safe, sustainable, healthy space in front of schools.
It's been absolutely brilliant. The kids are loving coming to school on Tuesdays. There's a real vibe and a sense of, joy when we start the day together. Lots of families are starting to come back. Our student attendance has increased on the days that we have open streets, and also we have less lateness as well. So it's just been brilliant all around.
We don't normally walk, we normally drive, so it's a really good incentive to get parents that don't normally do it, doing it. Once we're out and walking, they really enjoy it. It's so much safer. The kids love coming in here, playing, drawing with chalk.
This has been probably the highlight. Parents are saying, wow, can we do this more often, which has been fantastic. To see the joy on the kids' faces and to hear them saying, wanting to ride their bikes and wanting to have a play on the street's been amazing.
We have a huge percentage of our students riding to school. You can just see how successful it is. We've got kids riding, parents coming along, just really enjoying themselves. And it's changed my thinking. For someone who drove to work, bought my own bike and riding to work each day, it's amazing.
It's a fun experience. I normally walk, but today everyone's doing it, so I might as well join in.
It's also an initiative that residents and the local community can take part in. We want to see people coming out, having a coffee, we want to see people talking to their neighbours, and it's been really fantastic to partner with Bicycle Network and the schools to run these initiatives and really see, some healthy, happy street space.
Being part of Open Streets has been really exciting. We're interested in making people view their neighbourhood streets in a different way, being spaces for everyone and multi-use spaces, not just for throughways for cars.
Just listen to all this noise. It's great having everyone have so much fun around you and just being active. No, we're really stoked. We should happen every day.
This is very attractive for parents and kids to spend together. I think it's encouraging people to ride to the school.
I think it's definitely a good idea to get people active and getting people involved with the community. Because of this, it got a lot of me and my friends to ride to school every day. I get to see all my friends and talk to new people.
My name is Angelica Panopoulos and I'm your new Mayor of Merri-bek City Council. I'm a lifelong local. I've just finished uni, so I'm a law grad. I'm an activist and I've been a councillor for 2 years now. So today we are along the Moonee Ponds Creek in Glenroy, and this is somewhere where I've come ever since I was a little kid with my family, with Evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. Firstly, thank you for your patience and bearing with us as we sorted out the tech issues, but yeah, thank you all for being here. My name is Angelica Panopoulos and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council, and I'm also the chairperson for tonight's council meeting for planning and related matters, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our meeting tonight. I'll just begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of these lands and waterways, and would also like to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations communities who significantly contribute to the life of this city. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. The recording will also be available as video on demand, and gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we'll act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. In the event of an emergency or a disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. So for members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. So,
It's me, you, Mayor.
Yes.
May I? Apologies, I can only see myself and Councillor Carly Hannon. We can't see anything else.
All right, let's get that checked. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
The IT people coming. Great. All right, I think the IT people are sorting it out or coming into the room, and so we'll get to that. Whilst we're waiting, I might just go through the rest of the formalities, and we'll hold off until we get to the actual presentation for tonight. So, I would just like to introduce the other councillors that we've got in attendance tonight. So we've got Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor James Conlon.
Hi, everybody.
Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Monica Hart.
Hello, everyone.
And the following councillors have been approved to attend tonight's meeting via electronic means. And we've got Councillor Anna-Olivia Carly Hannon and Councillor Helen Pavlidis.
Good evening.
I'll also introduce Philip Priest, the Group Manager of City Development and members of the Urban Planning team. So in terms of apologies, we've got Councillor Adam Pulford, who is on an approved leave of absence until the 10th of July of this year. And we've received 3 apologies for tonight's council meeting, and that's from Deputy Mayor Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor Lambros Tapinos, and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Are there any apologies from other councillors tonight? No. All right, I'll just check with councillors if there are any disclosures of conflicts of interest to declare. And, yep.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Sorry, I can't see anything, but for the for the second item this evening, I have a conflict of interest due to one of the objectors.
Great, thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. So immediately before we consider that item, I'll just, I guess, ask you to provide the details and the type and nature of that conflict, and then I'll ask you to leave the meeting before the item is moved and to come back, once it's been considered and voted on. I'll just see if we've got any IT support yet, or you guys still can't see anything online. All right, still working on it. So we'll just, I guess, hold on then. As that's, I guess, the formalities, and now we've got confirmation of minutes, so I'd rather everyone be able to see for that. All right, just so we're not waiting around for a while, councillors, I might just ask if we can adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes whilst we sort out that tech issue. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Riley to second. All those in favour? Great. So we'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes and come back at 6:50, and hopefully our IT issues will be resolved by then.
And to everyone in the gallery, thanks for your patience once again. Thanks again for that patience. We've just resolved some of our tech issues there. So we're now up to item 4 for the agenda this evening, and that's the confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting. Councillors, can I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes from the council meeting for planning and related matters held on the 24th of May 2023? Councillor Riley has his hand up. Is there a seconder? Anyone to second that? Councillor Conlon to second. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Great. So before we move on to the reports for consideration, I'll outline how this council meeting for planning and related matters will run this evening. For the item in relation to a planning permit application, firstly, the relevant planner will introduce the report and the officer's recommendations. I'll then give objectors the opportunity to make their submission, and after this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you're making a submission, please clearly state your name for the record. You're requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please don't repeat what earlier speakers have said, and please keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns? Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note that there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as the chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or to reduce the time available to any speaker. So item 5 is the presentation of reports, and we've got 2 reports for this evening, with the first being 5.1, 1A Champ Street, Coburg, planning application MPS/2021/257B. Are there any conflicts of interest on this one? No. With that, I'll move to Alex Osborne, Senior Urban Planner, to present the report.
It is now. Good evening, thank you everyone. We have an application to amend a planning permit at 1A Champ Street, Coburg. The existing permit is for the sale and consumption of liquor associated with a hotel, bar and restaurant. The application is at decision stage. The site is located within the southwestern portion of the Pentridge precinct. You can see in the image left of screen. The image on the right of screen is within the panopticon, which is the key focus of the proposed amendment. This image is also within the panopticon facing west. The more sensitive interface is the QM building, which is located roughly 20 metres east of the panopticon. You can see in the image left of screen is the QM building on the left-hand side, the panopticon on the right. The image on the left shows the QM building and the balconies on the upper levels facing west. In terms of planning controls, the original application triggered a permit under clause 5227, which is for licensed premises. Notably, the proposed amendment relates only to the sale and consumption of liquor on the premises. All existing uses at the site are permitted and currently operational. In terms of the strategic policy setting, the site is within the Coburg Activity Centre, where a broad mix of uses is encouraged. The objective is to function as the prime shopping, living, employment and activity precinct in Merri-bek. The proposal, so Section 72 amendment, this is to alter the hours of operation. So the key change there is to bring hours forward to 7 a.m. on Sundays for the restaurant, bar and conference rooms, and to allow use of the panopticon area between 12 p.m. and 1 a.m. daily. Increase in patron numbers, the capacity for the panopticon would be set at 300 maximum. An increase in patron numbers for the conference rooms from 350 to 450, and add capacity for functions within the Heritage Interpretation Wing on the ground floor for 160 patients. The proposed amendment would also allow live music within the panopticon area, so a condition will be amended to facilitate that. The final change is to extend the red line plan over the panopticon. In terms of consultation, 27 objections were received. The main issues raised were noise, patron management, accidents and crime, air pollution and the campfire, and traffic impacts. A PID meeting was held on the 25th of May 2023, where an agreement was reached between parties to reduce hours of the panopticon area. The panopticon will now cease use at 9 p.m, where previously it was proposed to cease at 1 a.m. The officer recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit subject to the following key changes and conditions. Extend the red line plan to include the panopticon, restrict use of the panopticon from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. daily, not until 1 a.m. as originally proposed. Restrict the number of patrons in the panopticon to 300. Allow restricted live music within the panopticon, and include post-commencement acoustic testing as per a condition on the permit. Thanks.
Thank you. So we've got one objector who's indicated that they wish to speak, and that's Perry Koutsalakis, who I think is here in person. Yes, Perry, come on in, and you've got the 3 minutes. Hey. Just make sure that the mic's on. Excellent.
It's on? Yep.
It's great. Yes.
I'm Perry Koutsalakis, so I live on the 4th floor of the QM building. My balcony faces westwards, so it faces the panopticon. My concern is 12 to 9, 63 hours a week of live music, people drinking, 300 people out there. The sound bounces, so no matter where the speakers are, the sound's going to bounce off those walls straight into our apartments, to our living spaces and to our bedrooms. I'm also concerned about the fire and the smoke coming into our apartments. And also the amount of patrons that they want 7 nights a week. if patrons are leaving at 1 a.m, exiting the venues into the piazza, then spilling onto the streets, 1 a.m. finish means the noise will carry on until maybe 1:30 or 2 a.m. We need to sleep to get up to go to work. Children need to go to school. Other people with medical issues need a restful, peaceful night's sleep. My preference would be that the Panopticon stays as a garden for people to go out and enjoy quietly. I don't think there's any need for music out there. There's plenty of internal space for people to listen to music and to drink. There's no need for them to be drinking outside, listening to music outside for 9 hours a day. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Perry. With that, are there any questions of Perry? Yep, Councillor Hart.
Perry, I know that at the...
Monica, your mic. Yeah.
I understand that at the planning meeting there was discussion between the developers around the issue of changing the times from 1 to 9. Did you have ability to be at that meeting, to be part of that discussion?
Yes, I was.
So you weren't happy with that?
I think we're still concerned about the outdoor speakers and music and live music being played in the garden. I think we were all very concerned about the fire, and there was a little bit of confusion during that meeting about whether there was or wasn't going to be a fire. One of the representatives said the fire was no longer, they were no longer asking to have the fire. Then somebody else said, no, we are having the fire. So there was a lot of confusion. So we're still not, I'm not sure exactly what it is that they're asking for, whether the fire is part of the application or not. So I think we're just concerned about live music, people drinking, and the number of people that will be out there. Because if you were to say, look, it's going to be 300 people on a Saturday and maybe a Sunday, then we might say, all right, okay, that's only 2 times a week. But when you're saying 7 days a week, that seems like a lot of people making a lot of noise every day of the week.
Great. Can I also ask just one second question?
One follow-up and then we'll get the applicant in.
I just, sometimes I try to attend those meetings, but that one I couldn't get to. I just wondered, was there also any sort of discussion of how the likelihood, I know the applications for the 7 nights, was there any discussion about the likelihood of how frequent it might actually occur in practice?
One of the Adina's representatives did say that even though we're applying for 7 nights a week, it's more likely to be once or twice a week. However, I'm dealing with the facts that I see on the application.
I understand.
So my concern is if it's approved, it's a business. If they can have the venue booked out 7 nights a week, that's what they're going to do. They're not going to say, no, 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 we only want to book it out once a week. So I'm just dealing with the facts on the application.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. I believe you can hop back to the gallery and we've got the applicant in, I think, the online Zoom room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We've got Annabelle Paul, who is from AP Planning and is the applicant.
So my concern is if it's approved.
So, Annabelle, we'll just check that your audio is working, and the way to not get the echo is to mute the live stream, and we'll just see if your audio is working.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Annabelle Paul and I'm from AP Planning, and I'm here tonight representing Shaya and the Adina Hotel. Stephen Moore from the Adina Hotel and Scott Singh from Shaya are attending the meeting in person. The Adina Hotel is now up and running, and the licensed premises permit was issued back in 2021. We are just seeking some changes to that permit. The primary change that I think has been the subject of some objection is the use of the Panopticon garden. This is a special heritage feature of the Pentridge site that was approved as part of the overall development. It's already used as an outdoor garden area and there's no restrictions on time or numbers of patrons within the area. And this application is only seeking to use that space between 12 p.m. and 9 p.m. for the service and consumption of alcohol. Currently, the National Trust takes heritage tours through that space, and function guests, etc., could already use that space with no restrictions on time or hours. As outlined in the officer report, we have made some changes since advertising to respond to some concerns raised. That is to limit the hours between 12 noon and 9 p.m. And that really is to bring it back to outside noise sensitive sleep time. There was proposed originally to have a smaller number of people up until 1 a.m. And we also confirmed, there was a bit of confusion, but we're confirming that we're not seeking to start at 7 a.m. in the Panopticon area. That's only to start at 12 noon. We highlight there's also hotel rooms that have a direct interface to that Panopticon garden area, literally separated by planes of glass. So the Adena management have their own management incentive to manage this space very sensitively, to manage noise impacts to the hotel guests that will be sleeping in those rooms, as well as to residents in the surrounding area, such as in the QM building. Any music played will be in accordance with the acoustic report that was prepared in support of the application and as reflected in the conditions of permit put forward by the council officer, which we support. This includes limits to noise being at a background levels, not being drums and other loud noises, conditions on where the speaker can be located, and also for there to be post acoustic testing after 3 months of operation, just to ensure that it is complying with the EPA standards, the noise protocol, and if it isn't, for adjustments to be made. There's an existing patron management plan that's approved under the permit, and there's a condition of permit for that to be updated. That relates to responsible service of alcohol, patrons leaving the venue quietly, and security, etc. And that will be implemented and updated. There is no change to how patrons come and go to this site. As outlined, it's already approved as a function, conferences and functions in the restaurant. Most people arrive by taxis, etc., via the Porte Cochere, which is well separated from Champ Street and the other sensitive...
sorry, Annabelle, you're hitting a bit over time there, so if you could wrap it up in the next sentence.
Okay, I'll finish up. Perhaps just to finish up, this site is within the activity centre zone. It is very consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme and policy, and there also are a number of other licensed premises in the immediate area, as well as within the site. And we support the council officer recommendation, including the conditions of permit.
Thank you, Annabelle. Councillors, are there any questions to put to officers or the applicant? Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to ask a question of the applicant, who I can't really properly see because they're on the screen behind me. I was wondering if there has been any consideration to giving the local residents a respite by not having the 300 strong crowds 7 days a week, maybe reducing, going for a smaller number of or fewer number of days within the permit.
Thank you. It certainly won't, it's not anticipated that there would be 300 people there 7 days a week. It is only to serve alcohol associated with functions such as wedding ceremonies, to serve like a glass of champagne, or to have like a pre-dinner drinks associated with a function that's held at the venue. They certainly don't have bookings for 7 days a week, but we are seeking that time and that number just to allow flexibility for when bookings are made, and to allow flexibility to cater for the numbers that the internal venue can cater for. So we anticipate that it will be more popular, say, on Fridays or Saturday nights. However, they are seeking the opportunity to be across those days, but we certainly don't anticipate that there would be 300 people there every day of the week, and certainly not from 12 noon to 9 p.m. It's really just to give a band of time in which those functions can occur. And just going back, it doesn't, at the moment, that space could be used for those numbers across any days of the week. This really is only just to serve alcohol, this application.
Thanks, Annabelle. I see Councillor Bolton's got another question.
Yes, so I was wondering if if your intention is that it wouldn't be 7 days a week, would you be amenable to an amendment to three times a week?
I have discussed that with my client, and unfortunately, they really do need the flexibility to cater for when functions are booked. Sometimes conferences come in and they might be earlier in the week. Weddings are obviously more likely to be on weekends, but they really do need the flexibility. And this is within the activity centre zone. The Merri-bek planning scheme certainly encourages licensed premises within this area. There's already the Brewdog premises within the site. There's the cinemas and other restaurants. Immediately outside their site, there is a number of other licensed premises, such as the Drum Hotel, the Glass Den. They operate far later. This is only to 9 p.m. in the Panopticon area. These other venues operate till 1, and I think one of them operates to 3 a.m. The actual hotel itself already operates every day of the week and does allow for 1 a.m. finishes for functions every day of the week. So this is a very small subset of the overall use, and we really don't think that there's any way we can limit it to 3 days, given that we don't know when functions, etc., are to be booked.
Thanks, Annabelle. Councillor Hart, you've got a question, and then I'll go to Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, just in relation to the issue that was raised by Perry, and it may not be, it's not central to the application, but just if you could clarify it and neighbourly interest really, about the fire.
Sure.
Thank you.
In the original application, there was mention about providing campfires, and that was purely a description about the original application. We proposed to have up to 300 people to 9 p.m. and then for 40 people between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. And in the description of the application, we talked about that being for smaller groups to sit around a campfire and do storytelling and so forth. There is actually no planning permit trigger for a campfire. It is run by local, managed by local laws. So it wasn't sought to be part of the application. In any event, we've now pulled it back to 9 p.m, but any campfires is really outside this process and is managed by local laws.
Thanks, Annabelle. I've got another question from Councillor Conlon.
Yeah, I just have a quick clarification question about a detail which I couldn't find in the report, and apologies if I've missed it, but the Panopticon is not currently publicly accessible, is it? It's closed to the public?
Correct, and it isn't intended to be publicly accessible. It will only be used by patrons of the hotel, either patrons who are staying at the hotel or by patrons coming to a function, such as a wedding, held at the hotel. It's not publicly accessible, no.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. All right, we'll see if there are any other questions for Annabelle or for our council officer. And if not, councillors, could I please have a motion? Councillor Riley, what motion's that one?
I'd like to move the officer recommendation. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll see
I
if
have a seconder.
Yeah, I'll see if you've got a seconder for that. Councillor Carly Hannon's got her hand up. We'll just pop Annabelle out of the Zoom room so she's not also voting. Great. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, thank you to the community and all the objectors for this. This is, to me, it's kind of satisfactory. It's not an outstanding outcome, but it clearly heard tonight the concerns of the locals. But it is an activity centre. There are already other similar venues nearby. I didn't hear any feedback about problems with them, but I'd be interested to hear about that. But something we can hear about later, but we deal with noise and this kind of problem all down Sydney Road. I live in Brunswick and we're dealing with these kinds of issues all the time. So I think the fact that it's been restricting the hours outside to 9 p.m. means that I think, I'd hope that the patron would start to dwindle before then because they need to clear them out by that time. I was hearing Perry talk and those concerns about noise afterwards and people hanging around. It's in the interest of the business and the community there that they actually have their patrons disperse quietly. We have these things going on all the time, and I would hope that they will be doing that so that you don't have people standing around talking to the wee small hours and annoying you in the activity centre. So whilst it's not a perfect outcome, there is a concession there on the part of the business as far as the liquor licence goes, and we hear that they can actually keep things happening beyond that, regardless of the liquor restrictions. So I think it's kind of a satisfactory outcome for me. The important point is that at 3 months there's going to be some checks on the acoustics, and I would encourage the residents to keep a diary, a noise diary, and to do that from tonight. You need, if they're breaching the noise, you need to be documenting, you need to be getting your community to document it. If you don't do that, and that 3 months comes up, you're wasting your time and any efforts you've got in terms of problems that arise. You need to be very clear of those times. The thing about noise is it's ephemeral. You need to capture it at the time, and you need to describe it and get all the details. But I would encourage you to get all of your neighbours and everyone to be diarising noise problems from now on, because you're going to be needing to have this discussion with them, and if there are problems, you can demonstrate and show that evidence, because once the noise goes, it's gone, and you need to be able to sort of show that it actually happened at some stage. So that's something I've learned over the years. It's really important to keep a diary, just to demonstrate how serious, how repetitive and how ongoing those problems might be. But having said that, I think this is kind of satisfactory, and it's kind of a reasonable compromise in an activity centre.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Carly Hannon is the seconder.
Thank you. Yes, I rise while still seated to support this officer recommendation. I think the language I'm hearing a bit tonight is probably a little bit too negative for me. I just really want to focus on how fantastic the activation of Pentridge is, and how great it is to actually be hearing about these opportunities to make these indoor-outdoor spaces, and to be actually thinking about how we, really sophisticatedly use our activity centre to make a great place for people to socialise, to do events. And I just want to state as well that, the Adina Hotel is obviously where patrons are coming, people are sleeping. Residents on Tramp Street have a massive old prison wall and a road between them and Pentridge. So I think many of us have probably been to Pentridge all nights of the week, and can guarantee that it's working very well, and that there's not issues of noise flooding out onto the streets. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. Do I have any speakers against this motion? Councillor Bolton? Yep, so that amendment's been circulated by email. I think because this amendment has been moved on the floor and not circulated through to officers ahead of time, if councillors wish to move any sort of amendment, I think we will need an adjournment so that we can actually get this done properly. So if councillors wish to move an amendment, I'll move that we have an adjournment for how long? Phil, do you reckon you guys need to be able to do this? All right, let's move an adjournment for 20 minutes. If councillors wish to move an amendment, and that amendment was regarding reducing the days of the alcohol operation from 7 days a week to 5 days a week. So if more than one councillor is keen on moving that, I'm just going to move that we have a 20-minute adjournment, because we really can't be moving amendments on the floor of these sorts of meetings, as we've outlined before. All right, do I have a seconder to move for a 20-minute adjournment? Thanks. Councillor Hart, all those in favour? Those against? Great. So that's 20 minutes, so that gives us to 7:24, 7:34. We'll be back then. Thanks everyone in the gallery for waiting for us some more. Thank you. We'll just make sure that we've got our councillors online joining us. And thanks to everybody in the gallery for your patience whilst we were just going through that amendment. So we have had the mover speak to this, the seconder speak to it. Councillor Bolton had proposed an amendment. Let's get that up on the screen and make sure that you've got a seconder. Yep, so Councillor Conlon to second and Councillor Bolton.
So my amendment is very simple. My amendment is very simple. It's simply to amend the days of operation of the Panopticon area.
Okay, that's important. I'm on green, so let's just check
I'm on
with
green too.
Yeah, so that's an us issue. No, like he couldn't even hear me. Yeah. So, can you guys hear me? All right, so you can hear me. Can you hear Sue? Sue, say
Hello,
something?
hello, hello. Testing,
All right,
testing,
okay.
testing. I can be heard.
Go ahead, Sue. Sorry about
alrighty.
that.
So my amendment is very simple amendment. It's simply to amend the the days at which the Panopticon can be used for the consumption of alcohol to 5 days per week instead of the 7 days per week as was proposed by the officers. And given that the applicant indicated that they would really only be likely to use the Panopticon once or twice a week, this ought to be totally acceptable to the applicant. I think the resident or objector who came earlier and spoke had a very good point. I think 7 days a week is too much, but I think allowing it to be used for the consumption of alcohol 5 days a week totally enables the area to be, active, lively place, especially in the summer months when you've got daylight saving and so forth. So it doesn't really, it isn't really a big impost on the applicant. I think 5 days a week provides a lot of opportunities for, merriment in the area. And apart from that, I think, I think it'll be great to have, well, unfortunately, it's not really. It's only really for guests, not for mere members of the public like me. But anyway, I think 5 days a week is sufficient for the applicant.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon as the seconder.
Yep. I in general support this this application, this amendment. I know the area well, the Pentridge area. I agree that it would benefit from having a bit more activity there. There's still it's still sort of a growing area, and there's more and more activity slowly coming into that place, which is good. And so this amendment facilitates that really. So I mean, all we're doing is just reducing the number of days from 7 to 5 in which the Panopticon can be used for drinking and live music. So in general, that's like all this stuff is something I'm very supportive of. I'm just thinking, it doesn't need to be done for 7 days a week. So that's every single night of the week. I think, we do need to have a bit of a balance in these mixed use activity areas where, the residents who do live there do have, some kind of right to peace and quiet, most days of the week. But I think also living in an area like that, it is true that there's going to be some kind of noise and activity, which is, that's the pros and cons of living in these types of areas. So I think this amendment just tries to strike a bit of a balance between these two things. And given that the applicant themselves have said, we're still giving them more than double what they said, how many days they said they wanted, which was 2 days a week. So this is 5. So yeah, hopefully that should be more than amenable to the applicant.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. Are there any speakers against this amendment? I've got Councillor Riley with his hand up.
Yeah, look, I didn't expect to be doing this, but this is what happens in planning meetings. It's becoming a regular feature of our meetings. I'm a bit concerned about the equity issues here and the fairness for businesses. There are other businesses in the same quadrangle who I'm not exactly sure of their hours. I'd have to go away and do that research, but it does appear to me to be certainly, I assume that they probably offer or run a 7-day-a-week business. The other irony of this is that this is only controlling the use of liquor, when in fact the crowds can spill out and use those spaces for much longer hours and 7 days a week. So it seems to me to be a bit inconsistent. I'm not sure why you want to do that and why you would impose this in an activity centre. Residents living in this area need to understand they're in an activity centre, you're going to get mixed use, you're going to get all sorts of different uses, and you need to do your due diligence when you're buying into these places and these proposals come up. There was a compromise down to 9 o'clock that the officers worked on. I just think this is triggering another VCAT case. That seems to be why we have these meetings. You just do changes to trigger a VCAT case and create delays and create extra costs. I'm not too sure of the this doesn't seem to be terribly consistent or fair.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Any speakers in favour of this amendment? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, look, some of these questions have obviously occurred.
Monica, your mic.
Sorry. Yeah, look, and thank you to Perry, the resident who has come in tonight, because some of these issues had occurred to councillors in terms of just understanding the compromise that was reached, which was the 9 o'clock one. So there were questions about, well, was there any discussion about limiting days if this was a wider issue that had come up in that meeting. So it wasn't something that councillors were totally unaware of or hadn't thought of, but I think by coming to the meeting you were able to elaborate on that. And I think the amendment is really just to strike a balance and just come to a little bit more of a nuanced compromise, because I think the hotel has already come a long way to that, with cutting down to 9 o'clock. But I think this just allows a little bit more flexibility, and I'm also not hearing that anyone has tried to go against what the hotel was looking at doing, which was on their own terms talking about 2 or 3 nights. So I think the aim of this is just as a way to ensure there is some respite in there for residents around the potential for intensity. And it still doesn't detract from the vibrancy or what's looking to be achieved inside the Pentridge area. And I think it's an attempt by council to hear a concern and look at how we can balance that out. The concerns about VCAT, I would imagine if the applicant themselves have talked about only wanting that limited number of hours, I can't foresee that a VCAT looming ahead is a high potential that we need to be concerned about, because we had sought the views of the applicant before that amendment was proposed. So it was seen as a way to reflect the contributions at the meeting tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other speakers against this amendment? Councillor Carly Hannon?
Thank you. I feel like the offer recommendation was very reasonable. From my perspective, I'd be happy to have a few nights where it is to 1 a.m. But I don't think, even if there was enough activity to see someone out with a beer 7 nights a week until 9 p.m. For me, in an activity centre, that would be not even slightest concern. I again feel that Champ Street with, a prison wall is quite separated from Pentridge. And I also hear councillors, interest to always hear of an objection and to amend concerns. And I think a lot of the time, when we have even just one objection, then we just have to put an amendment up there because we hear a concern and we want to quickly do something. But really, we need to be looking at this as people making planning decisions.
Thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. I'll see if there are any other speakers in favour of this amendment. I'd just like to speak quickly against this amendment and just, I guess, getting down to the very basics of our role as decision makers in these planning and related matters meetings. We're here to decide on whether or not something is an acceptable outcome.
And that's within a planning scheme that many of us do not like, and that many of us want to see reformed and improved to get better quality outcomes and developments. But to be clear, this is about acceptable outcomes. We had initially seeking for alcohol to be used in the panopticon from midday to 1 a.m. That's been revised down from midday to 9 p.m. We've got limited acoustic music, so nothing that would suggest like having a big party outside in that area. We've got acoustic testing that will be done 3 months after, if the permit is issued. And there's also conditions regarding the location of the speaker and where that music will be facing. And so for me, we've had the initial application proposal, we've had resident concerns, and we've had officers and the residents and the applicant working to get somewhere in the middle. And to me, that is quite clearly an acceptable outcome in an activity centre zone. So, I can see why people are trying to move this amendment and I guess the intention behind it. However, we have to be really clear that this alone may not trigger somebody going to VCAT and challenging just this condition alone, but we need to look at this in the context of the other compromises that have been made by the applicant in getting to this position in the first place. So, I'm obviously just speculating here, but if we've got this condition imposed and reducing the hours from 1 a.m. to 9 p.m., and reducing the kind of music to being limited acoustic music and background kind of music, and a condition in there about acoustic testing 3 months later, and a condition about where we place speakers, when you look at it in the context of that, we really have to think, is it worth risking going to VCAT and then potentially having those compromises that have been won undermined? And so I think that, we need to remember that in terms of the outcomes. And we also need to remember that this is ratepayer money when we go to VCAT over something where we might end up with a worse outcome than what has already been negotiated by our officers and the applicant and the residents. And so I just really want councillors to remember that in their decision-making process. I understand the intention, but, this is about acceptable outcomes and our role in a quasi-judicial role and not as pure politicians as we're so used to acting in regular council meetings. So that's just what I wanted to say, I guess, against this amendment. Now, I'll go back to Councillor Bolton for the right of reply, and then we'll vote on that one.
What I'm proposing with my very simple amendment...
Sue, your mic.
What I'm proposing with my very simple amendment is something that is an attempt to balance some of the different interests and different people engage with this particular planning amendment. I think, if we're going to say we're not going to listen to anyone who comes to make a verbal submission to council meetings, then we should cancel all of that and just be a rubber stamp. But I'm not interested in just, ignoring the concerns of residents. I think we do, I think we're trying to balance up the interests of residents and the interests of the applicant. If the Adena Hotel had been here before the residents, I might actually think, have a different viewpoint. I mean, I do support the protection of live music and, when live music venues have existed before apartment blocks have been built. And so I do support the retention of live music venues. I think that's very important. So I think it's this is a change that's being proposed after the residents have been living here for a certain number of years. I'm not quite sure when the apartment block was built, but the residents are already there, and I think it is, I think just accepting 5 days per week, I think is a substantial acceptance of, that this is a central activity or activity centre, but that there does need to be a little skerrick of amenity for residents. And I think it is true that this is an outdoor venue, it's not an indoor venue. And there are a lot of hard surfaces where the sound bounces around. So I think, and also when people socialising and drinking, it is often noisier than if people are just sitting around having a chat. So I think this is a totally reasonable amendment. I would appeal to the applicant to say, you know, really what is being proposed here is no different to what they said verbally. I know it's not in the actual application, but what they said verbally is they only envisage using the panopticon 1 or 2 or 3 times a week, no more than that. And so taking them at their word 5 days a week gives them ample opportunity to experiment with events, and I would encourage them not to go to VCAT over such a simple change, which they say they don't need this many days a week.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. So with that, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1, 2, 3, and we'll get a division on that. So all those in favour were Councillor Hart, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Pavlidis. All those against were Councillor Carly Hannon, Councillor Riley and myself. So that amendment is now part of, I guess, the motion itself. I will ask the mover and the seconder, do you guys still wish to move and second this motion? Or this?
Yeah. I'd rather still.
All right, you're
Please,
happy to still
application.
second it? Great. And Councillor Riley, you're happy to still move it? Excellent. Okay, so back to the substantive. We've had the mover and the seconder, and now we're up to a speaker against the motion, if there is any. Any other speakers in favour of the motion? No? All right, we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? So that one is carried unanimously. So I'll now ask the officer to outline the next steps, please.
Council has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit for the sale and consumption of liquor associated with a hotel, bar, restaurant and cafe, subject to the conditions contained within the alternative recommendation. Following the notice of decision, both the applicant and all objector parties will receive a copy of the notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit. Objectors will have 21 days to appeal Council's decision at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. In the event that no appeal is lodged at VCAT, an amended planning permit will be issued. If a permit is issued, the applicant has 60 days from the date of issue of the notice of decision to appeal any conditions on the permit.
Great, thank you, Alex. So the next item that we've got this evening is at 5.2, which is 477 Sydney Road, Coburg, planning application MPS/2022/773. And Councillor Carly Hannon, you've disclosed a conflict of interest?
Yes, through you, Mayor. I believe it to be a material conflict of interest because one of the objectors is Merri Health, and my husband is a director of that organisation, so he may have been involved in being part of that objection.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we'll ask you to pop out of the meeting for the duration of this item. Thanks, Councillor Carly Hannon. Okay, so I will now ask Mark Hughes, the Unit Manager of Urban Planning, to present the report.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. So I'm presenting the item at 477 Sydney Road in Coburg, and that seeks approval for the construction of a 7-storey mixed-use building. In terms of the key planning controls, this site is located within an activity centre within the Coburg Activity Centre zone. It's also within a car parking overlay, Schedule 1. In terms of the strategic setting, this is an area for significant housing growth. The ACZ control, Activity Centre control, has an overall height guidance of 21.6 metres, a street wall height of 11 metres, and upper level setbacks of 7 metres from Sydney Road. In terms of the site and surrounds, this site is south of the intersection of Bell Street and Sydney Road. At 477, there are laneways to the south and laneways to the west of the site as well. On the left is an image of the site There you can see it's a two-storey building, and then to the right you can see the rear of the building from the laneway. That's the western laneway. You can see to the south of the site we've got Walker's Arcade, and then again you can see the building two-storey form there, and then you can see the built form, which is single-storey to the north. This is the laneway that runs along the south of the site. You can see it's a bluestone laneway, and then the image at the bottom there, or the bottom right, you can see the rear laneway looking towards Bell Street. Approval sought for a 7-storey building plus basement, and there's also a rooftop terrace. There's 20 apartments which are split evenly between 1 and 2 bedrooms. There is some public realm improvements along the laneway to the south. The design is a simple contemporary black and white form. There are 42 car parking spaces, and there is no bicycle.
Other way. 42
Sorry.
bikes and no car parking.
No car parking. Thank you.
It's a bit of a change.
It's getting late.
Yeah.
In terms of consultation, there was 19 objections received. The main issues related to height and open development, demolition of the existing building, insufficient car parking. There was a planning and information discussion meeting held on the 2nd of May, and that was attended by 5 objectors. Following that meeting, the applicant indicated acceptance of conditions related to the inclusion of a car share space and the consolidation of some of the apartments, which results in the loss of some of the yield. Overall, the officer recommendation is one of support, so to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit. There are some amendments made to the plans that's inclusive of a car share space, deletion of 6 apartments to improve daylight, setting back the planter box from the street, so that will make the appearance appear more akin to the 11-metre height guidance. And there's a public works plan that looks to upgrade the laneway surface of the laneway, some mural art, landscaping, and relocation of bollards. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So we've got 2 objectors here who have indicated that they wish to speak. And so I believe we've got Marilyn Moore here on behalf of the Coburg Historical Society. Thanks, Marilyn. Just checking your mic's got a green light. Awesome. Take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. The Coburg Historical Society is opposing the demolition of the whole building at 477 Sydney Road, known as the former Joblings and Whitner's shoe store, and more recently, the Bendigo Bank. It is 2 stories at the front, constructed in the 1920s, so coming up for 100 years, and it fits in perfectly with the Coburg shopping streetscape. We favour the retention of the front 2 stories and development at the rear, so a change. The proposal also envisages changes to the bluestone laneway, which is rare in the Coburg shopping centre. We believe this should have been referred to a heritage expert as well as to the engineering department, and we couldn't find that in the report. The building is above the preferred height. As topography is not referred to in the report, this development has been assessed as though that it was on a flat site in a flat shopping centre, which is not the case. There is a large slope from Bell Street down to Munro Street. This change in land level will exaggerate the height of the building as viewed from the south, and is a good reason to reduce the number of floors proposed. The residential entrance will be some distance down from the adjoining southern Bluestone Lane from Sydney Road, requiring changes to the lane, which could be avoided and more convenient if the residential entrance was located closer to the front of the building in Sydney Road. Gratefully, our objection to the lack of an awning has been listened to and is a condition of the NOD, so thank you. Our concern about the dark colour scheme at the top of the building seems also to have been heeded. It was going to exaggerate the height. However, our concern about at least some car parking space above that share multi-use space has been ignored. The building will have one lift and one stairwell. Many of the apartments have wheelchair accessible features, but if one lift breaks down, any disabled inhabitants will have no access to or exit from the building, which is a concern to us. A conveniently located taxi rank has not been included, and not every disabled person will want to use the share car. We want many more changes to the application. The building height reduced, retention of the front facade of the building, and as much as possible amount of the historic lane, Bluestone Lane, retained.
Thanks. Marilyn, if you could just wrap it up in the next couple sentences, you're just over the 3 minutes.
Okay, there are other reasons that we found in the activity zone and precinct 1, which meant that this is not really addressing the heritage buildings that are around about. And they the streetscape character, which is defined in one of the precinct objectives, is to enhance and reinforce the character of Sydney Road corridor, in brackets, predominantly individual shop fronts of 2 to 3 stories, Victorian era scale.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thanks. Sorry about that, but thank you for coming in and giving us your
Thank you.
objection. Thank you. So next up, we've got Annalie Orkins, who is also here in person.
Good evening. So I put in an objection initially, and I still hold to this objection. I'm very strongly opposed to the demolition of this building for a range of reasons. So I'm a resident of almost a quarter of a century, and I'm also a historian with heritage experience. So this building is representative of retail history, of neighbourhood character. It's not just a building, it represents the history of a community and also retail history. So sometimes people just see, oh, it's architecture. No, it's beyond the built form, it's relationship to the history of the place. I take issue that there is no impact on surrounding heritage values because in fact there are other buildings on that strip that are covered by a heritage overlay. So this building proposed building has to be seen in the fact that it will have an impact. I think the idea that it's an either-or situation, that you have to demolish it or you don't have a new building, is a nonsense. I'm recently back from overseas and I've seen plenty of examples where buildings have been incorporated into new buildings. I think that this is a bad precedent. It is unfortunate that it's not been covered by an overlay yet, but I think it's important to take a broader view of this. I don't think that it's in conflict with the activity centre because I think it's quite possible to retain, if not necessarily all of the current building, some of it, and incorporate it into a building. I'm very concerned at the idea that the first few buildings will stand out from the build until other sites redeveloped. I think we need to take the council to take concept of what you want out of an activity centre and which do you intend to basically get rid of the heritage or not. So it seems to me that some of this report is not well informed. I did create a petition and I know that over 500 people have signed also that they are concerned about this. I think public awareness is low of what is proposed in general, otherwise I would have expected a stronger response. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalie, for coming in. So next up, we've got Justin Screeha from Ratio Consultants, and that's the applicant who wishes to speak.
Good evening. Can you hear me? My name is Justin Screa. I'm an associate town planner from Ratio Consultants, and we act on behalf of the permit applicant. This is a mixed-use proposal, but will be predominantly comprised of residential. And in the context of the current housing crisis, I think that's important to note up front. The Coburg Major Activity Centre has the highest priority within Merri-bek in terms of future development, and the site is earmarked for significant change by the planning scheme. In addition, local policy encourages increased housing density in the form of apartments in areas where significant housing growth is expected. The site has excellent access to shops and services, community facilities, employment choices, recreational space, and public transport. It also benefits from a lack of sensitive interfaces. The proposed height exceeds the preferred control of the activity centre zone by 2.7 metres, which is a minor variation. Schedule 1 to the activity centre zone sets very clear parameters that outline what an application needs to demonstrate in order to exceed preferred heights, and we applaud Council for the construction of this schedule as it sets out very clear expectations. The relevant tests include exemplary design, public benefits such as ESD excellence and public realm improvements, and built form outcomes which do not result in unreasonable visual impacts or overshadowing of key public spaces. This proposal passes these tests as endorsed in the officer report. In particular, the building will achieve ESD excellence with an average 7.5 star energy rating for the residential component of the tower, minimum 95% compliance for daylight access demonstrated by modelling, and an all-electric building with provision for electric bicycle charging in the basement. This was reviewed by Council's ESD officer and supported. The built form objectives in the activity centre zone envisage a mid-rise centre with heights in the order of 6 to 10 stories. So while the existing built form is 1 to 2 stories generally, again, this is an area for significant change in Merri-bek's planning scheme. In that context, the minor height variation is appropriate. 7 stories is in the order of 6 to 10. There will also be public realm benefits, as mentioned by the council officer in the introduction, by way of surface improvements to the laneway and by lighting. It's our understanding that bluestone can be incorporated to DDA compliant surface upgrades, and we look forward to working through that as part of a permit condition. In terms of car parking, the objectives of the activity centre seek to prioritise active and public transport modes over private vehicles. Given the site's excellent proximity to public transport, including rail and tram, and the policy imperative in the planning scheme to reduce car dependence, we submit that the proposed dispensation is sensible.
Sorry, Justin, if you could just wrap it up in the next 2 sentences. Thank you.
No worries. So in summary, this proposal exhibits a high level of compliance with the planning scheme, achieves ESD excellence, has no detrimental amenity impacts, and is in an area that's highly regarded and sought after and will contribute to housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just hang on for a second. We'll just see if any councillors have got any questions for you or for the officer, Mark. So, any questions from councillors at all? No? All right. Maybe I was a bit early. Then you can hop out. Thank you. So, councillors, is there a... Councillor Riley, I saw stand up first. So, Councillor Riley, what is your motion?
I'm happy to move the officer recommendation.
Yep.
I've got a seconder.
I'm happy to second that. Councillor Riley?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. This is an interesting one. I won't repeat everything that the proponent's just gone through in terms of the activity centre, because actually Justin stole a lot of my points, which I won't kind of repeat. But it's important for people to realise that we, as a council, have been trying to get some movement in this area. I'm not sure that this building is going to be the sort of beginning of a lot of change here, but maybe it will be, and we'll see. And I'm pretty sure it's not the most exemplary example of what I'd like to see happening in the area, but nevertheless, it is what it is. we don't have any heritage controls, and you can have a broad view and you can have hopes and you can have wishes and desires, but unfortunately they don't stand up at VCAT and they don't stand up here. And it's unfortunate. We do regular heritage reviews and things, and I don't know why this hasn't been picked up before, and I'm a bit concerned that it hasn't been included yet. So it's not something we can rely on, but it is a 7.5 star. They're proposing 7.5 star average design, which is better than the acceptable. It's got excellent internal amenity. These are the words from the officer's report. Strong compliance with the apartment code. It's got a communal space and rooftop levels. It's got private open space and balconies that meet the requirements under clause 58, standard D19. It's got living rooms and bedrooms that comply. And then we've even proposing a change or a condition that they lose apartments 7, 10, 13, 16 and 19 and consolidate them into a better form for future development to the south of the site. It's got 40% requirement for cross ventilation and other standards for apartments. The amount of accessible buildings far exceeds what's required under the scheme, which is really good to hear. That's why I'm pleased to hear that the Bluestone will be DDA compliant once they sort that through. That's been required as well. And there's zero parking. So just for people who don't understand that, that means people are going to come and live here and use the excellent public transport and other social transport options, and without having to bring cars, because they won't have a right to be able to park the car on the street. There isn't any local parking right. So that means less congestion on our streets while we get more population in an area where we are encouraging it. So while it's not outstanding, this, and they are going one story over, but I think that'll be a trigger for many councillors in the room tonight. It seems to be the pattern that's happening at these meetings, but I don't think it's not required. It's a preferred control. It's only 2.77 metres. So I'm just finishing up.
Yep.
And that means, given that these other things are better than the average apartment that's proposed, it's not something I'm jumping up and down about, but it's actually better than average.
Riley.
And so therefore, I think going slightly higher is an acceptable outcome. So they're my sort of reasons for supporting this.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. As the seconder, I would like to speak in favour of this application. So this is I guess this is exactly the kind of build, in my opinion, that we want to encourage in Merri-bek. This is a mix of only 14 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in central Coburg, right in the activity centre zone, in an area that we have identified that's ready for rejuvenation and revitalisation. So, firstly to the quality of this application, we're all very used to seeing pretty poor standards or just average quality applications that tick the boxes and don't do much else. But, here we've got an application with a 70% best score, 7.5 star average NatHurst rating, one that provides at least 32 bike parking spaces, allowing for different configurations. So, we've got e-bike charging points, a parking space for a bike and a trailer, and for a cargo bike, which I remember from our last council meeting was an important point. And it's also 85% accessible, which exceeds the requirement of that 50%. Importantly as well, this is a gas-free build. So at council, we're running a campaign called Electrify Everything, where we want households to get out of gas and to retrofit and to switch their electric appliances, electric appliances, and so on. And so it doesn't quite make sense to me that, when we've got a good application that meets and exceeds the minimum requirements under the planning scheme, that we'd then essentially try, if councillors wanted to vote this down, that they would then try to put up more hurdles to getting a gas-free build in Merri-bek. There's another couple of things. So regarding heritage, it's not a heritage protected site. We've received clear advice that the strategic state policy around heritage can only be considered when a heritage overlay applies, and that doesn't apply here. So within the lens of what we have to think about as a responsible decision maker, we've got to realise that
that consideration isn't relevant for us tonight. It's not just, about the vibe that we think that something should be protected. It isn't, and that's what we're considering tonight. Regarding the heights, this is proposed to be around 2.7 metres above the preferred height limit, so not a mandatory height limit, and it's in an activity centre zone. It amounts to less than a storey over that preferred height. And as was outlined in the report, it doesn't actually result in any additional overshadowing of primary pedestrian routes or key public spaces between those times of 10:30 and 2. So it's not as if this extra height, which is set back, provides overshadowing to key pedestrian routes on that level. And so, again, when we've had clear advice from officers, clear indications from previous VCAT decisions that refusing this application, if it's on the grounds of heritage or height or overshadowing, none of these would likely stack up at VCAT. And again, I would really encourage councillors to think about the responsible use of ratepayer money and the time of our officers. And, I just think that we should think really carefully about rejecting an application that complies with and goes above the minimum standards that we're so used to seeing. All right. I'll see if there are any speakers against this motion. Councillor Bolton with her hand up. Yeah.
Is the building gas free? I thought it was gas free, but in the plans that Philip sent round, I can see where we've got the blue square. It says that there's a gas meter room. So I just wanted to,
We'll just clarify that one.
Thank you. Through the chair, my understanding is this gas-free building is committed. I might just look to Mark Hughes for further confirmation.
Can we ask the applicant, because it definitely says gas meter room on there.
Can I just ask which page that is on
So
the agenda?
it's on the email that Philip Priest sent through to us at today, Wednesday, 1:06 p.m, explaining Councillor Bolton's alternative resolution.
Request, yeah.
Where you've got the blue hatched area, it says gas meter room.
Okay. Just give it a moment for mine to load, and we'll just see if Mark or Phil have got that information handy. Are we able to ask the applicant as well? If the applicant out there in the gallery has got that information handy, you can feel free to hop on over and tell us just to assist with that.
So the commercial kitchen in the food and drink premises on the ground floor has gas. The residential component is entirely electric.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So that answers that question. Now we'll go to Councillor Bolton speaking against the officer recommendation.
I won't speak very long. I'm proposing an alternative resolution, which is an amendment, not a refusal. And I'm hoping councillors will vote this down so that I can put the arguments around that particular alternative resolution. But probably one of the central elements of my alternative is to reduce the number of heights from 7 to 6 to comply with the preferred height limit. And, this is partly on the basis that this is considered by the officers on page 74, this proposal to be an acceptable application rather than an exemplary application. My understanding is that really developments that or applicants that want to go above the preferred height limit need to demonstrate exemplary design rather than just acceptable design. I also think that... What?
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Councillor
let
Bolton.
me finish. You've destroyed my train of thought. But also, I think we do have to take into account also that this building will look a lot higher than 7 stories when you look at it from the vantage point of Munro Street and Harding Street. I think there is an issue in terms of the topography and the looming nature of this building. I'm also really upset with the applicant for their refusal to consider, in terms of good community mindedness, to consider retaining the facade of the heritage shopfront and just abandoning, you know, any good community mindedness and just wanting to rip it all down, when it would be, you know, if you look at one of the attractive features of a lot of heritage shopfront areas is the fact that in some council areas they have retained these heritage shopfronts. I know doesn't have a heritage overlay, and that's been an oversight by the council over a number of years. A lot of people thought there was a heritage overlay, but I think my alternative isn't dealing with heritage because it can't deal with heritage, unfortunately. So it's looking predominantly at the question of height.
Sorry, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, look, I'm really a bit, I was a bit aghast. I just need to know, if the councillor could actually speak to the requirement for exemplary. I've never heard of this in my 6 or 7 years.
Page 74.
I'm just going to ask you to clarify when I ask. Can I just explain? Because you claim that it's got to be acceptable, but then it's got to be exemplary. So I'm just wondering which objective or which part of the planning scheme is actually requiring that.
Thanks, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
Well, in page 74 of the officer's report, it talks about the application being acceptable, an acceptable response.
Mm-hmm.
Right above that, it talks about a development needing to be of an exemplary quality.
All right, let's just
anyway,
hold on a moment. Okay, Councillor Bolton, continue, sorry.
Yeah, anyway, I don't think we need to particularly debate that. I'm just pointing out that it is considered one part of the council officer report describes the development as being acceptable
Thanks,
and not
Councillor
exemplary. So, you know.
All right, let's just not interrupt Councillor Bolton, please. Okay, Councillor Bolton, continue.
So anyway, I've really finished what I was going to say, I think, except that it's been distorted. But I'd just like to request that councillors vote this down and hear the arguments I've got to put in my alternative resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Are there any other speakers in favour of this officer recommendation? Is it?
Not that one.
Have we seen it?
No, it is in the letter. It's come up in the meeting. I'm pretty sure it's very straightforward. No adjournment required.
All right, well, what's your amendment? And we'll see if you've got a seconder, and then we'll consult with Phil.
I've got an amendment to that. I'm happy to propose it to the applicant that the commercial aspect of this development be gas-free. And that's, again, that would be a minor change in just changing the proposed appliances within the building. And that is consistent with all of the evidence that shows that full electrification of buildings, including commercial buildings such as this, is more than capable technologically of being done. And there's lots of organisations like the Cooktop Alliance that is calling for this sort of thing, which is a bunch of chefs saying that it's perfectly fine to cook with induction cooktops.
Let's ask Phil, is that... Thanks.
Thank you, further Mayor. It would be legitimate for council to include such a condition as an addition to condition 7 in relation to environmentally sustainable design. I'm not sure whether council...
Sorry to interrupt, Bill. I can't hear a word.
Maybe go just closer to the mic. Let's give it a go.
Sorry, councillor. Again, through the chair, it would be open to council to make an addition to condition 7 of the recommendation to include a requirement for the ground floor tenancy to be gas-free. So that would be open to council. I don't know whether council wishes to hear from the applicant on that matter.
Is that you're open to considering it? Okay, well, we've got a thumbs up. So, Phil, in terms of just drafting that, I'm happy to, Are you happy to incorporate it
Happy
into
to
the motion?
incorporate such an amendment, yes.
Yep, so am I. So we're happy to incorporate that into the substantive. Can we just make sure that the wording will be okay before we discuss
Sorry, that
any
just came
further?
up,
Yeah,
through
no,
this
that's-
process. I just noticed it then that it
Thank-
wasn't gas-free.
Thanks for raising that. Okay. All right, so for the benefit of people in the gallery and perhaps those who might be watching the live stream, we've had an amendment proposed about having the commercial kitchen be gas-free. That's been accepted by the mover and the seconder of the officer recommendation, and so we're just making sure that that gets worded up properly so it can be put into the substantive and the prospective permit. Okay. All right, let's deal with this bit first, and then we'll, if we need to, we'll get to that.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Under environmentally sustainable design on page 65, 66, it does say electric, there's no gas. So I'm just confused. Is this something different to what is currently?
Yeah, so Councillor Conlon identified that in part of it there is, I guess, the capacity for gas in the shop front, in the restaurant, or the food and drink premises downstairs. So this is just confirming that that actually would be all electric. So I think it's just consistency across the apartments and the prospective business, and we've had the applicant give a thumbs up, so we'll take that as being acceptable. So I think it's just to confirm that. So Phil has just sent around an addition to condition 7D, saying that the ground commercial tenancy to be noted as gas-free. And so, yep. Okay. That's all good, Phil? Like, do you need any more time, or that's okay? Cool. All right, so that's become part of the substantive. We've had a speaker against in Councillor Bolton. I'll see if there's another speaker in favour of this motion. Any other speaker against this motion?
I'll speak against this motion, and I'll reserve my right to speak in relation to the alternative motion that Councillor Bolton's going to propose.
Okay, so so there was debate. So Councillor Riley, you can choose to exercise your right of reply if you wish. All right, great. We'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour of the officer recommendation with that amendment incorporated, we've just got 2. All those against, the 3, 4. Again, we'll do a division. So all those in favour were Councillor Riley and myself. All those against were Councillor Hart, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Conlon and Councillor Pavlidis. And so, that's been lost. So now we need the alternative, and Councillor Bolton had an alternative which was an amendment. Or, yeah, okay, not a refusal.
An alternative motion?
Yep. Are you mic'd on? Great. Okay, what was your
I've got
motion?
an alternative. It's not as good an alternative as I'd like it to be, but it's an effort to try and improve some things. I probably should start speaking once it's on the screen.
Yeah, so I'll just check if you've got a seconder to that. Yep, Councillor Conlon to second. And yeah, if you could just outline what the difference is between this and the last one.
There's really just 3 elements which are different. So one is to delete 1 story to reduce the height of the development from 7 stories to 6 stories. Secondly, to include a ground level loading bay. And thirdly, retain the bluestone laneway surface.
So wait, to retain the bluestone
Or
laneway
so
or to
it's,
reinstate?
Reinstate.
In
sorry,
line with the DDA stuff?
Reinstate the
Okay.
bluestone laneway.
All right. Yeah, you can speak in favour of that.
So I can speak?
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, I really would prefer it if this application was retaining the heritage shopfront, and I'm very angry with the applicant for just, just dismissing the community in not considering that. But I do feel these three issues I have raised, while they don't go to the core of the issue with this development, which is not respecting heritage, I do believe that reduction of the height by 1 story will help. I'd prefer to reduce it by 2 stories, but I think there's less of a case for that, given the preferred height limit. I think really a 6-story building in this site will probably appear like a 7-story building from the southern end of the shopping strip. I also think the loading bay, while I know VCAT tends to dismiss things about the loading bay, I think the loading bay is important, both for loading and unloading furniture to come in and out of the apartments, but also for tradespeople to do work on the apartments. Tradespeople are not able to park in 1-hour parking bays on Sydney Road. They're not able to park in 30-minute loading bays. They often need to stay for, several hours in order to do works. And then there's a question of the bluestone laneway, which was mentioned by one of the objectors. I think, so actually we'll talk a little bit more about the heritage. Well, I know I did investigate to see if I could find any grounds to reject the application on not retaining the heritage shopfront. I drew a blank, and so I'm not able to assist the community with that. I was alarmed when I found out through this particular application that there's no heritage protection for a lot of the heritage shopfronts in Coburg, and therefore I moved for council to initiate a heritage study of the heritage shopfronts in Sydney Road, Coburg, and that motion will come to the July council meeting. Hopefully this development doesn't get built, so that any new applications on the site will have to comply with future heritage controls in the shopfront. And I think Sydney Road and Glenferrie Road, I gather, are the 2 main iconic heritage shopping strips in Melbourne, because they are so intact. Brunswick has this level of heritage protection, but Coburg doesn't at the moment. And I think the traditional shopping strips are what contributes significantly to Melbourne's livability status. And I think, as one of the objectors noted, it's not retaining the heritage shopfronts doesn't mean no development. There
Thanks.
can be development at the rear.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Conlon as the seconder.
Yeah. Also, yeah, it was a bit surprised that some of these, some of the heritage shop fronts in Coburg, we don't have heritage overlays over them yet. So happy that that's coming to council. Yeah, also disappointed that the proposal didn't at least propose to retain the facade. It's I know it doesn't have heritage protection, but it is quite obviously a good example of 1920s local architecture, and there's plenty of examples of how at least the facade can be retained in developments across the city. I don't think facadism is necessarily the best outcome, but it's still better than demolishing the entire building fabric. So that, yeah, I'm also disappointed about that. But yeah, given that we don't have any planning grounds on the heritage front, I think it's at least incumbent upon council to really make sure that the proposal really fits within all of the relevant planning controls, including the discretionary height limits. I know they're discretionary, but I still think that given that this is an important heritage building without heritage controls, that we should be using the planning system to make this development as respectful as to the local context as possible. And then also, just in terms of the loading bay stuff, I know that might seem trivial to some, but like it is quite a strange phenomenon that the planning system doesn't actually like completely ignores the fact that people do need to move in and out of buildings, and it's quite common, especially in apartment buildings. Like if anyone's helped or moved in and out of an apartment building, you know, if there isn't anywhere to park, you know, a car or a truck, it is just really disruptive to the people in the apartment and all the people on the street and around in the surround. So it's a pretty silly oversight of the planning system. So I think it's a small thing that can be negotiated through the planning application process. So, you know, again, it's not the ideal way to achieve these types of outcomes, but, you know, we can get those types of outcomes through the negotiation process. So, yeah, happy to support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Conlon. I'll see if there are any speakers against this alternative. No. All right, I'd just like to speak against this alternative, specifically on the loading bay topic. And I know, I guess, again, I can see where this is coming from. But, you know, again, we've received very clear advice from council officers that the requirement for an on-site loading bay for, you know, like occasional furniture deliveries or for, you know, things like the tradies or whatever restaurants, it has very limited planning scheme justification, which is the scheme that we're working within. It's been seen, you know, as not being required by our own council's expert traffic engineers. And, you know, like we as councillors, we get, you know, briefings and presentations often about our VCAT outcomes and how they go. And, you know, we've had a clear pattern of VCAT decisions that have said that they don't support the inclusion of a loading bay condition in a permit application. So, you know, one specific example was about 251 to 265 Lygon Street, because in August of last year, we included an additional ground of refusal for an application, saying that, you know, it didn't include a loading bay. Well, the tribunal struck out council's recommended condition to get a loading bay at the front of the site. So again, you know, we've got a clear pattern of behaviour, of decisions that says that requiring a loading bay isn't really sought under the planning scheme, and there's not much justification for it. So, you know, in I guess the previous debate, you know, I spoke to the height and the fact that actually doesn't create that much more over it. It doesn't create any additional overshadowing. It's set back. The slope that people are referring to, it's not exactly a hill like Gaffney Street. It's a pretty slight slope when you think about it and when you walk along it and when you use that part of Sydney Road in Coburg. So, you know, I question under, like, what will this be? Like, why would this be supported at VCAT if it were to go there when, you know, overall this is a pretty good quality development and we see so many average ones and so many that are pushing the envelope far more. I just question why, you know, we say that we want more housing and that we want to provide a diversity of housing for people, but it just seems like a pattern of behaviours emerging where we say just not here or just not, you know, on the edge of a preferred height limit. So I just question that, but, you know, I can, I guess, see the way that the debate is going to go tonight, and I'll just encourage councillors once again to think about the best use of our ratepayer money. Okay, so any other speakers in favour of this amendment? Councillor Hart? Monica, your mic.
Thank you. It sounds like some of the debates reflecting the notion of what's a good quality building and what do we want to encourage in Coburg, what do we want to encourage in Sydney Road. And I would think that aspects such as particularly good EST levels, that's something that I not only would encourage, it's what I would expect, and it's not the substance of, the total substance of how you look at what's a good quality build or design. And in this particular case, one of the issues I think is, and other speakers have spoke about it, is that whole sensitivity to the historic aspect of the Coburg shopping strip. And both objectors spoke very well on that, as has Councillor Bolton and Councillor Conlon. And I too was very disappointed to be at the pit and hear from the applicant a total lack of recognition of what that means to community, and also an understanding of what that means in a broader historical context. And so I think notions about where do we sit with height and adherence to height limits, I think the notion is that when something's exceptionally exemplary, then there's an argument around flexibility, around height limits. And if that building had been, I think, one that incorporated a lot of was sensitive to the history of the area and was sensitive to the current design on that property, I think the discussion would be quite different at council tonight. The issue around the loading bay, that's the next one. I understand the issues that Councillor Panopoulos has raised, but the problem is that it's actually a real issue. And if you walk along there, there's a 30-minute park along Sydney Road. There's bollards on the one side of the building, and I don't know how you actually get a truck even down that back laneway sufficiently to probably unload things. So it's a difficult one in terms of planning, but it's a real one. So it's not a frivolous issue. It's an absolute gap around the state government planning. But I understand why I think there's necessity to keep raising it as well.
Thanks.
So I support the alternative motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other speakers against this motion? Any other speakers in favour of this motion? No. Councillor Bolton, is your right of reply?
In speaking in my round of reply, the last time I looked, 6 stories is more housing.
Microphone, Sue, please.
The last time I looked, 6 stories on this site is more housing than is currently there with 2 stories. So it's, my amendment does not prevent more housing being built on the site. And even if you preserve the heritage shopfront, it wouldn't prevent more housing being built on the site. It's really preserving a certain scale. And I think, council's begun a discussion about revitalising Coburg. One thing which you can see in areas where they've done up the heritage shop fronts, they actually attract tourist attractions, attract people to the area. There's a number of places in Melbourne and other cities where this has happened. And so, if we want to revitalise Coburg, we can do it. At the moment, there is a capital strike by a lot of landlords who don't want to spend money on the buildings because they want to get big bucks out of development. But there is, if developers got a strong signal to preserve the heritage shop fronts, it would be an attractive feature for central Coburg where you had development but you also retained those shop fronts. And the main element of my alternative resolution is reducing the height from 7 stories to 6, so just 1 level, no more than that. That should be totally okay for the applicant. And yes, I know VCAT hasn't been tolerant about loading bays, but at some point the local councils and the state government have to get realistic about this issue, because we're creating a disaster for the future by building huge numbers of developments without loading bays. And VCAT members don't have to cart furniture in and out of these apartment buildings. They don't have to cart ladders and plumbing equipment, etc., in and out of these apartment buildings. So maybe they're forgetting who actually does the work in this city, and they're not injuring their backs by having to do that, juggle these sorts of issues. So I just think this is something which councils, not just Merri-bek, all councils and the state government have to deal with for the future. Otherwise, we will be creating a totally unworkable city. But certainly, I'd urge councillors to vote in favour of my amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. So we'll put that one to the vote then. All those in favour? Got 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1. And I'm abstaining from this one, and we'll just get that for the division. So We've got all those in favour were Councillor Hart, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Conlon and Councillor Pavlidis. Councillor Riley was against and I'm an abstention on that one. Okay, so I'll now ask the officer, Mark, if you could please outline the next steps.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. The Council has resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit with the amendments discussed in the meeting. That decision will be posted to all objectors who have a 28-day period to lodge any reviews at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. The permit applicant has 60 days from the date of the NOD to lodge any appeal against conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, our meeting is closed at 8:40.